The gentle hum of healing crystals filled the medical bay as Dr. Lyra worked on another wounded refugee. Her delicate blue fingers moved gracefully over the scanner, checking for internal injuries that the brutal attack had caused. The young, Altine child before her had burns across his back from energy weapons, but he would live. That was more than could be said for thousands of others. 3 days ago, the Ravager Syndicate had struck without warning. Their massive ships had appeared in the Altine home system like dark storms, raining destruction on peaceful colonies. The Altines had no military ships to defend themselves. Why would they need such things? For 10,000 years, their species had known only peace. Lyra finished treating the child and watched as his mother carried him away to the refugee quarters. The research vessel Harmony's Edge had become a floating hospital, packed with survivors from 12 different worlds. Food was running low and medical supplies were almost gone. But the worst part was the helplessness. She walked through the corridors where families huddled together, whispering prayers to ancient gods who seemed to have abandoned them. Children asked when they could go home, and parents had no answers. How do you explain to a child that home no longer exists? In the communications center, Captain Hadrick worked frantically at the controls. His normally calm demeanor had cracked days ago when the first reports came in. Entire cities wiped out in minutes. Millions of Altines taken as slaves. Their beautiful garden worlds stripped bare for resources. Any responses to our distress? Calls? Lyra asked, though she already knew the answer from his expression. Hadrick shook his head. The Centauri Republic says they sympathize but cannot risk war with the Syndicate. The Vegan Confederacy claims they are already dealing with their own territorial disputes. The others either ignore us completely or send polite refusals. Lyra felt her heart sink. She had hoped that somewhere in the galaxy someone would care enough to help. The Altines had always been generous with their medical knowledge and agricultural techniques. They had helped dozens of species overcome diseases and famines. But now, when they needed help, the universe had turned its back. What about the outer, rim territories? She suggested weakly. Nothing but silence, Hadrick replied. The independent worlds barely have enough ships to protect themselves, and the corporate sectors only care about profit margins. A soft chime from the communication array made them both look up. A new message was coming through, but the signal was strange. It originated from a region of space that their star charts showed as unexplored territory. The transmission itself was unlike anything in their databases. Hadrick activated the message, and text appeared on the screen in perfect Altine script, though the translation seemed slightly awkward in places. Greetings, people of Altea. We have received your distress call and understand your situation. Help is coming. Our fleet will arrive at your coordinates within 72 standard hours. Hold your position and maintain hope. Signed, Earth Defense Coalition. Lyra stared at the message. Earth? I have never heard of this species. Hadrick was already running the name through their xenological databases. After several minutes, he looked up with confusion. There is no record of any species called humans or any world named Earth. This entire sector of space is listed as unexplored in our charts. Could it be a trap? Lyra wondered aloud. The Syndicate trying to lure us into another ambush? Doubt it, Hadrick said. The Ravagers do not use deception. They prefer direct violence and intimidation. Besides, what more could they do to us? We have nothing left to lose. Lyra nodded, though something about the message troubled her. There was a tone to it that she could not identify. It was not the usual diplomatic language used in galactic communications. It was direct, almost blunt. And there was something else, a sense of confidence that seemed almost arrogant. Over the next day, word of the mysterious message spread throughout the refugee ship. Some Altines were hopeful, believing that salvation was finally coming. Others were skeptical, wondering how an unknown species from unexplored space could possibly help when established galactic powers had refused. Lyra spent her time researching what little information they had about the Outer Rim. The region where the signal had originated was marked as a stellar graveyard, full of unstable stars and dangerous phenomena. No sane species would try to colonize such a hostile area of space. On the second day, their long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving through hyperspace toward their position. Whatever was coming, it was big. Multiple ships, possibly an entire fleet. Hadric ordered all civilians to emergency shelters and powered up their weak defensive systems, though they would be useless against any serious attack. Whoever these humans are, they certainly travel in large groups, he muttered, watching the sensor readings. As the final hours ticked by, tension filled the ship. Parents held their children closer, the elderly muttered prayers. Even the medical staff seemed nervous as they went about their duties. Everyone was asking the same questions. Who were these humans? Why would they help complete strangers? And what did they want in return? Lyra found herself in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. In her many years of studying alien species, she had learned that every civilization had its own motivations. The Alteans valued peace and healing above all else. The Centauri Republic prized order and stability. The Vegan Confederacy sought knowledge and exploration. But what drove a species that lived in the dangerous Outer Rim? As she watched, space itself seemed to tear open in brilliant flashes of light. Ships began emerging from hyperspace, but they were unlike anything she had ever seen. Where most civilized vessels were smooth and elegant, these were angular and aggressive. Where others used bright metals and decorative elements, these were painted in dark colors with intimidating designs. The lead ship was massive, bristling with weapon systems that could level cities. Its hull was scarred and pitted, showing signs of countless battles. As more ships appeared, Lyra realized with growing amazement that this was not just a rescue mission. This was a war fleet. A communication request came through, and Hadric accepted it immediately. The view screen flickered to life, and Lyra gasped at what she saw. The being looking back at them was clearly a predator. Forward-facing eyes, sharp teeth visible when he spoke, and an intensity in his gaze that made her instinctively step backward. "This is Admiral Stone of the Earth Defense Coalition. We received your distress call. Can you provide tactical information about enemy forces and civilian population status?" His voice was deep and carried an authority that demanded immediate attention. There was no warmth in his expression, only cold calculation. This was not a diplomat or a merchant. This was a warrior. Hadric quickly provided what information they had about Ravager positions and estimated civilian casualties. The human listened, without emotion, occasionally asking specific questions about enemy ship configurations and defensive capabilities. When the briefing was complete, the human nodded once. "Understood. All civilian vessels will maintain current position until the area is secure. Earth Defense Coalition out." As the communication ended, Lyra felt a chill run through her body. They had asked for help, and help had arrived. But looking at those dark ships with their terrible weapons, she wondered what kind of beings they had invited into their peaceful corner of the galaxy. Silence stretched across the bridge of the Harmony's edge as the Alteen crew processed what they had just witnessed. The human ships hung in space like sleeping predators, their dark hulls reflecting starlight in ways that seemed to absorb rather than illuminate. Each vessel bore scars and markings that spoke of violent encounters. Dr. Lyra pulled up the biological scanner readings from their brief communication with the human admiral. The results made her hands tremble. This species showed every physical characteristic of an apex predator. dense bone structure, overdeveloped muscular systems, and reflexes that registered beyond their equipment's ability to measure accurately. "Run a background scan on their fleet composition," she told the sensor technician, trying to keep her voice steady. The results appeared on screen within minutes, and they were disturbing. The human ships carried enough firepower to crack planets. Their smallest fighters had weapon systems more powerful than most species' capital ships. But what worried Lyra most was the organic nature of their tactics. The fleet moved like a hunting pack, with each ship positioned to support the others, in complex attack patterns. Communications Officer Vel looked up from his station with wide eyes. "Doctor, I am detecting multiple transmissions between the human vessels. They are using encryption methods I have never seen before. But there is something else. The transmission patterns suggest they are planning something very large." Before Lyra could respond, Captain Hadrick activated the main view screen. "I want to speak with them again. We need to understand who we are dealing with." The connection established quickly, and Admiral Stone's face appeared once more. This time, Lyra noticed details she had missed before. Scars crossed his features in patterns that suggested violent encounters. His uniform bore symbols that looked like weapons and predatory animals. Most unsettling were his eyes, which held an intelligence that seemed to calculate threats and weaknesses automatically. "Admiral," Hadrick began carefully, "we are grateful for your response to our distress call. However, we know nothing about your species or your homeworld. Could you provide some basic information about your people?" Stone's expression did not change. "Earth is located in what you probably call the Outer Rim Dead Zone. We are humans. We received your message and decided to respond." "But why?" Lyra found herself asking. "Why would you travel so far to help strangers?" For the first time, something resembling emotion crossed the Admiral's features. It might have been amusement, but on his predatory face, it looked more like a hunter contemplating prey. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "The Ravager Syndicate has been expanding unchecked for too long. They think the galaxy belongs to them." Hadrick exchanged glances with his crew. "Admiral, with respect, the Syndicate has conquered dozens of star systems, their fleet numbers in the thousands. They have weapons and tactics that have defeated every military force sent against them." "We know," Stone replied. "We have been watching them for some time." The casual way he said it sent chills through the all-teen crew. Watching them? From where? How long had these humans been observing galactic events without anyone knowing they existed? Lyra leaned forward. "Admiral, could you tell us about your homeworld, your species' history?" Stone paused, as if considering how much to reveal. "Earth is what your classification system would call a Class 12 death world. Extreme weather, dangerous wildlife, natural disasters, toxic environments. Most species consider it uninhabitable." The bridge fell silent. A Class 12 death world was theoretical. The galactic scientific community had never found evidence that intelligent life could develop under such conditions. The environmental pressures would be too extreme for complex evolution. "That is impossible," Vel whispered. "No known species could survive long enough to develop space travel on such a world." Stone's expression might have been a smile, but it looked more like a predator baring its teeth. "We did not just survive. We thrived. We fought our way to the top of the food chain and stayed there for millions of years." Lyra felt her stomach drop. Everything about human biology suddenly made sense. They were not just predators. They were the ultimate predators evolved on a world so hostile that it had forged them into living weapons. "Admiral," she said carefully, "what is your species' experience with warfare?" This time, Stone definitely smiled, and it was terrifying. "Doctor, humans have been at war with something for our entire recorded history. We have fought our own kind, our environment, our planet, and everything on it. War is not something we do. War is what we are." The communication ended abruptly, leaving the Altine crew staring at blank screens. The implications of what they had just learned settled over them like a heavy blanket. "Genetic analysis complete," the science officer announced, his voice shaking. "The human DNA samples from our communication scans show adaptation to extreme environments, redundant organ systems, enhanced healing factors, and stress hormones that would be lethal to most species. But there is more." He paused, double-checking his readings. "Their brain chemistry shows elevated levels of compounds associated with aggression and risk-taking behavior, but also enhanced pattern recognition and tactical thinking. Doctor, this species appears to be naturally designed for combat." Lyra sank into her chair. They had called for help, hoping for a diplomatic solution or advanced technology that could resolve their situation peacefully. Instead, they had summoned something from their nightmares, a species of natural-born killers from a world so dangerous that it had turned evolution into a weapons factory. "Captain," Vel said quietly, "incoming transmission from the Ravager fleet. They are demanding our surrender." Hadric activated the communication without enthusiasm. Warlord Cross appeared on screen, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a grin among his species. Behind him, dozens of massive warships moved into attack formation. "Attention, Altine survivors," Cross announced in his gravelly voice. "Your pathetic species has caused us enough trouble. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and we will make examples of you that will terrify the galaxy for generations." Before Hadric could respond, another voice cut into the transmission. It was Admiral Stone, his tone calm and conversational. "Warlord Cross, this is Admiral Stone of the Earth Defense Coalition. You have one opportunity to withdraw from this system immediately. Leave now, and you will live to see tomorrow." Cross's reaction was immediate and violent. His roar of laughter filled the communication channel. "Unknown species, you are either very brave or very stupid. Do you see my fleet? Over 300 ships, battle-tested and hungry for blood. What could you possibly do against such numbers?" Stone's reply was delivered in the same calm tone, but there was something underneath it that made Lyra's blood run cold. "We will destroy you!" The transmission ended, and space around them began to change. The human fleet spread out in complex patterns, their movements precise and coordinated. Each ship took a position that maximized their tactical advantage, while minimizing their exposure to enemy fire. Lyra watched the deployment with growing fascination and horror. She had studied dozens of species' military tactics over the years, but she had never seen anything like this. The humans moved like a single organism, each part supporting the whole in ways that spoke of countless battles and refined strategies. They are not just warriors, she realized aloud. They are professional warriors. This is not their first fleet engagement. As if in response to her words, Admiral Stone's voice came over the communication system one final time. "All civilian vessels, maintain current position. Do not approach the combat zone under any circumstances. Earth Defense Coalition ships, you are cleared to engage. Show them why nobody hunts the hunters." The words sent shivers through every Altine on the ship. There was something in the Admiral's tone that promised violence beyond anything they had ever imagined. They had asked for salvation, and instead, they had called forth war itself. Looking out at the approaching Ravager fleet, Lyra found herself wondering if they had made the greatest mistake in their species' peaceful history. But it was too late for regrets. The hunters had come, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when predators from a death world decided to go to war. The first shots came from the Ravager fleet exactly as expected. Massive energy beams lanced across space, striking where the human ships had been moments before. But the humans were no longer there. They had scattered in patterns that seemed random but were actually precisely calculated to confuse enemy targeting systems. Dr. Lyra watched the battle unfold on the main screen with a mixture of fascination and horror. The Ravagers fought exactly as they always did, using overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority to crush their enemies. Their tactics had worked against every other species in the galaxy. They were not working against the humans. "How are they moving like that?" Vel whispered, staring at the tactical display. "Those acceleration patterns should kill any living creature." The human ships twisted and turned through space in ways that defied everything the Alteans knew about space combat. They pulled maneuvers that would subject their crews to gravitational forces that should have liquefied their internal organs. Yet they not only survived, but seemed to thrive in conditions that would incapacitate any other known species. The human response to the Ravager attack was swift and brutal. Instead of energy weapons, they used kinetic projectiles fired at incredible speeds. Solid chunks of metal accelerated to near light speed punched through Ravager shields like they were not. Even there, the impacts created explosions that lit up space like new stars. "Impossible," Captain Hadrick breathed. "Nothing should be able to penetrate Ravager defensive systems that easily." But the humans were not finished. As the Ravager fleet tried to regroup, human fighters swarmed around the larger ships like angry insects. These small craft moved even faster than the capital ships, their pilots performing maneuvers that should have been physically impossible. Commander Lisa led one of the fighter squadrons, her voice crackling over the communication channels as she coordinated attacks. "Blue Squadron, hit their sensor arrays. Red Squadron, target their weapon systems. Gold Squadron, you are with me. We are going for their command ship." Lyra listened to the tactical chatter with growing amazement. The humans did not just fight. They fought with a level of coordination and strategic thinking that spoke of generations of warfare. Every move was calculated, every attack precisely timed for maximum effect. The Ravager response was panic. They had never encountered resistance like this. Their usual tactics of intimidation and brute force were useless against enemies who seemed to welcome violence. Worse, the humans were clearly enjoying themselves. For Earth and her children. The battle cry echoed across multiple communication channels as human boarding parties breached Ravager hulls. What followed was not combat. It was slaughter. The humans fought through wounds that would have killed any other species. They showed no fear, no hesitation, and no mercy. Ravager warriors who had terrorized the galaxy for decades found themselves facing beings who had been forged in the fires of a death world, creatures for whom violence was as natural as breathing. Major Tom led the assault on the largest Ravager dreadnought. His team moved through the ship's corridors like ghosts, appearing and disappearing at will. They used the ship's own systems against the crew, turning lights into weapons and life support into traps. "Boarding Team Alpha to all units," Tom's voice was calm despite the chaos around him. "Enemy resistance is collapsing. They cannot adapt to our tactics, moving to secure the bridge." Lyra realized with growing horror that the humans were not just winning. They were teaching the galaxy a lesson. Every move they made was designed not just for military effectiveness, but for psychological impact. They wanted word of this battle to spread. The Ravager fleet, which had seemed so massive and threatening just hours before, was being systematically destroyed. Ship after ship fell to human weapons or was boarded and captured by human troops. The survivors began trying to retreat, but the humans had anticipated this. Human ships appeared behind the fleeing Ravagers, cutting off their escape routes. It became clear that this had never been a battle. It had been a trap, and the Ravagers had walked into it willingly. Warlord Cross appeared on the communication channel one final time, his reptilian features twisted with rage and fear. "What are you? What kind of monsters did we awaken?" Admiral Stone's response was delivered with the same calm professionalism he had shown throughout the engagement. "We are humans, Warlord. We are what happens when a species evolves on a world that tries to kill them every single day for millions of years. We are what you get when survival requires becoming the ultimate predator." The Admiral paused, and, when he continued, there was something in his voice that made every being listening understand they were hearing a fundamental truth about the universe. You have spent generations preying on peaceful species. You have grown comfortable with easy victories over civilizations that do not understand warfare. But you made one critical mistake. You assumed that everyone in the galaxy was like your previous victims. You were wrong. Cross tried to respond, but his ship exploded before he could finish his sentence. The Warlord and his flagship were consumed in a ball of nuclear fire that lit up the system like a second sun. The battle was over. Of the 300 Ravager ships that had entered the system, fewer than 20 escaped. The rest were either destroyed or captured. Their crews either dead or in human custody. The entire engagement had lasted less than 4 hours. As the human fleet regrouped, Lyra found herself staring at the tactical display in disbelief. They had just witnessed something that should have been impossible. A numerically inferior force had completely annihilated one of the most feared military organizations in the galaxy. "How?" she whispered. "How did they do that?" Captain Hadrick was running analysis on the battle records, his expression growing more troubled with each report. "Doctor, I am reading the human ship configurations. Their vessels are not more advanced than Ravager technology. In many ways, they are more primitive, but they use them in ways that no other species would consider." He brought up a tactical analysis that showed the human strategy in detail. They anticipated every Ravager move. They planned for contingencies that most military minds would never consider. And they executed their plan with precision that suggests extensive combat experience. Lyra nodded slowly. They have been fighting wars for their entire evolutionary history. While other species developed art, philosophy, and peaceful sciences, humans perfected the art of killing their enemies. A communication request came in from Admiral Stone's flagship. When they accepted, the human leader appeared on screen, but now Lyra could see him differently. This was not just a military commander. This was a member of a species that had turned warfare into a science. Altine vessel, the immediate threat has been neutralized. However, our intelligence indicates that this was only a small portion of the Ravager fleet. The main force is currently attacking your homeworld. We will be proceeding there immediately. Hadrick leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, the main Ravager fleet numbers in the thousands. Even with your impressive capabilities, can you handle such numbers?" Stone's smile was predatory and confident. "Captain, you have seen what one human battle group can do. You are about to see what happens when we decide to fight a real war." The communication ended, and the human fleet began moving toward hyperspace jump points. As they prepared to depart, Lyra realized that they had witnessed only the beginning. The humans had not come to fight a battle. They had come to wage a war, and they intended to win it completely. Looking at the debris field that had once been a mighty Ravager fleet, she understood that the galaxy was about to change forever. The age of easy conquest was over. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were not here to ask for permission. The Altine homeworld burned beneath a sky filled with Ravager ships. Cities that had stood for thousands of years lay in ruins, their crystalline spires reduced to glowing slag. In the underground shelters, millions of civilians huddled in darkness, listening to the sounds of destruction above. Colony Administrator Vell had been coordinating refugee efforts from a bunker deep beneath the capital city when the scanners detected something impossible. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Lots of ships. But these were not Ravager vessels. "Sir," the technician called out, his voice trembling with hope. "I am reading human energy signatures. It is the Earth Defense Coalition." Word spread through the shelter like wildfire. The mysterious aliens who had answered their distress call had arrived at their homeworld. Families who had given up hope began to pray again. Children stopped crying long enough to listen for sounds of rescue above. But on the surface, the human arrival created a very different reaction among the Ravager occupation forces. General Voss, commanding the planetary assault, received reports that made no sense. The incoming fleet was massive, but it was moving in patterns unlike anything in their tactical databases. The humans did not approach like a conventional rescue force. They did not broadcast surrender demands or attempt to establish communication. Instead, they spread throughout the system like an infection, taking positions that seemed strategically meaningless until viewed as part of a larger pattern. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical display with calm satisfaction. The Ravager fleet was positioned exactly as his intelligence reports had predicted. They had focused their forces on the planet's surface, assuming that any rescue attempt would try to fight through their orbital defenses. "All units, this is command," Stone's voice carried across dozens of ships. "Initiate Operation Deathworld. Show them what happens when predators decide to hunt." The human attack began in 12 different locations simultaneously. But this was not the direct assault the Ravagers expected. Human ships appeared in the outer system, targeting supply convoys and communication relays. They struck mining operations on distant moons and destroyed refueling stations in asteroid belts. Colonel David led a ground assault team that had been deployed while the main fleet distracted orbital defenses. His soldiers moved through the ruined city like ghosts, appearing where they were not expected and vanishing before enemy forces could respond. The Ravagers had never faced an enemy that understood urban warfare. Their tactics involved orbital bombardment, followed by occupation. But humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of fighting in cities, turning every building into a fortress and every street into a trap. "Echo Team to command." David's voice was steady despite the chaos around him. "We have located the primary slave processing center. Beginning liberation operations now." What followed was not a battle, but a demonstration. Human soldiers moved through Ravager positions with deadly efficiency, using weapons and tactics that turned the aliens' advantages against them. When Ravager troops took cover behind barriers, humans used explosives that turned the barriers into deadly fragments. When they tried to retreat to fortified positions, humans appeared behind them. But the most unsettling aspect of human warfare was their psychological approach. They broadcast footage of Ravager defeats on all communication channels, showing their enemies exactly what was happening to their forces. The humans wanted every Ravager in the system to understand that their situation was hopeless. Dr. Amy worked from a mobile command post, analyzing captured Ravager communications. Her specialty was xenopsychology, and she had developed techniques for breaking enemy morale that were both subtle and devastating. She did not torture prisoners. She simply talked to them. "You see," she explained to a captured Ravager commander, her voice gentle and reasonable, "your species has never encountered true predators before. You think strength comes from numbers and superior weapons, but real predators understand that victory comes from superior tactics and absolute commitment." The Ravager tried to maintain his composure, but Amy could see the fear growing in his eyes. She had done this dozens of times before, and the pattern was always the same. Species that had evolved on safe worlds could not comprehend the mindset of beings forged by constant danger. "Your fleet has been divided into isolated groups," she continued, showing him tactical displays on her portable screen. "Your supply lines have been cut. Your communication network has been compromised. In military terms, you are already dead. You just do not know it yet." The information she gathered from these interviews was transmitted to human forces throughout the system, allowing them to predict Ravager movements and counter every strategy before it could be implemented. Above the planet, the space battle raged with increasing intensity. The Ravager fleet had the advantage of numbers, but the humans had something more valuable. They had experience fighting in environments where a single mistake meant death. Captain Lisa commanded a destroyer that had been modified for operations in hostile environments. Her ship could function in radiation fields that would kill most. Crews operate in gravitational anomalies that would tear other vessels apart and fight in conditions that other species would consider suicidal. "All units, this is Reaper Squadron." Lisa's voice carried an edge of excitement that made her crew smile. "We are engaging the enemy command cluster. Time to show them why Earth builds warriors, not victims." The human ships dove into the heart of the Ravager formation like hunting birds attacking prey. They ignored damage that would force other vessels to retreat, pressing their attacks until enemy ships were either destroyed or disabled. But the humans were not just fighting to win. They were fighting to send a message to the entire galaxy. Every tactic they used was designed to be as visible and terrifying as possible. They wanted other predatory species to understand what would happen if they followed the Ravager example. On the planet's surface, human ground forces had begun coordinating with Altine resistance groups. The peaceful Altines had never been trained for warfare, but desperation had driven them to fight back against their oppressors. The humans taught them simple but effective guerrilla tactics. "Remember," Major Tom explained to a group of Altine, civilians who had volunteered for combat training, "you do not need to be as strong as they are. You just need to be smarter. Use your knowledge of the terrain. Strike where they are weak and disappear before they can respond." The Altines learned quickly. Within hours, they were conducting raids against Ravager supply depots and communication centers. The humans provided weapons and tactical support, but the Altines provided something equally valuable: local knowledge and burning motivation to reclaim their world. As the battle continued, it became clear that the Ravagers were facing something they had never encountered before, an enemy that not only refused to surrender, but seemed to grow stronger as the fighting intensified. Human casualties were lighter than any projection had suggested, while Ravager losses mounted exponentially. General Voss tried desperately to contact the Ravager High Command, but human electronic warfare had made communication impossible. His forces were isolated, cut off from reinforcement, and facing an enemy that appeared to anticipate their every move. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his intelligence staff. "How can they predict our tactics so accurately?" The answer came from an intercepted human communication. Admiral Stone was speaking to his fleet commanders, and his words chilled every Ravager who heard them. "Remember, we are not fighting to capture territory or gather resources. We are fighting to eliminate a threat to peaceful species everywhere. These predators have grown comfortable preying on the weak. Today, they learn what happens when they meet something stronger." The Ravager fleet began to crumble. Ships tried to retreat, but human forces had positioned themselves to cut off escape routes. Others attempted to negotiate, but the humans had made it clear that surrender was not an option. The Syndicate had shown no mercy to their victims. They would receive none in return. As the sun set over the Altine homeworld, the sky began to clear of enemy ships. Human vessels moved through orbit like apex predators claiming their territory, broadcasting a simple message to any remaining Ravager forces. This is Admiral Stone of the Earth Defense Coalition. You have 1 hour to evacuate this system. Any Ravager vessel remaining after that time will be destroyed without warning. The hunt is over. In the shelters below, Altine families began to emerge into daylight for the first time in weeks. The sounds of battle had faded, replaced by the hum of human rescue ships beginning relief operations. They had been saved, but they had also learned something profound about the universe. Sometimes, when monsters threaten the innocent, salvation comes in the form of bigger monsters. And sometimes, that is exactly what the galaxy needs. The morning sun rose over New Alti City, casting long shadows through the ruins where construction crews worked alongside human engineers. 3 months had passed since the liberation, and the planet was slowly returning to life. But everything had changed, and everyone knew it. Dr. Lyra walked through the medical district, watching human medics work alongside Altine doctors. The humans had brought medical supplies and technology, but they had also brought something else. Knowledge of trauma medicine that came from centuries of treating battle injuries. Their field hospitals saved lives that would have been lost using traditional Altine methods. The integration had not been easy. Altine children still hid when they saw human soldiers, their instincts recognizing predators even when their minds understood these particular predators were friendly. Human troops had learned to move slowly around civilians and keep their weapons concealed, but their very presence changed the atmosphere of any room they entered. "Dr. Lyra," a voice called behind her. She turned to see Admiral Stone approaching, flanked by 2 of his officers. Even months after the battle, his presence still made her nervous. There was something about humans that other species could never quite get used to. "Admiral," she replied with a polite nod. "How can I help you?" Stone handed her a datapad containing intelligence reports. "We have been monitoring Ravager communications across the galaxy. Word of their defeat here has spread faster than we expected." Lyra scanned the information, her eyes widening as she read. Dozens of star systems that had been under Ravager control were reporting uprisings. Slave populations were rebelling, confident that help might actually come if they fought back. Several Ravager strongholds had been abandoned as their forces retreated to more defensible positions. "This is remarkable," she said. "One battle has changed the balance of power across multiple sectors." "That was the intention," Stone replied, matter-of-factly. "The Ravagers maintained control through fear and the belief that resistance was hopeless. We demonstrated that they could be defeated. Sometimes that is all oppressed people need." They walked together toward the government district, where reconstruction efforts were most visible. Human construction equipment worked alongside Altine crews, rebuilding with materials and techniques that combined the best of both civilizations. The new buildings were beautiful like traditional Altine architecture, but they were also hardened to survive attacks. "Admiral," Lyra said carefully, "there is something I need to ask you. When this is over, when the Ravager threat is eliminated, what happens then? Will your people remain in this sector?" Stone stopped walking and looked at her directly. His expression was unreadable, but she sensed he had been expecting this question. "Dr. Lyra, humans do not conquer. We do not build empires or demand tribute. We came here to eliminate a threat to peaceful species, and when that task is complete, we will return to our own territory. But surely you must want something in return for all this help?" The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city where human and Altine workers labored side by side. When he finally spoke, His voice carried a weight that suggested he was sharing something important. "Doctor, do you know what Earth was like before we achieved space travel? It was a world at war with itself. Humans fought humans for resources, territory, ideology, and sometimes just because we could. We nearly destroyed ourselves dozens of times." He paused, watching a human soldier help an Altine child retrieve a toy that had fallen into a construction pit. We learned something important during those dark years. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is what happens when the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Lyra felt something shift in her understanding of these dangerous aliens. You fight wars to prevent wars. Exactly. The Ravagers will never stop expanding unless someone stops them permanently. Other species in this galaxy are too peaceful or too weak to do what is necessary. So we do it. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Stone activated his portable communicator, and the face of one of his ship commanders appeared on the small screen. "Admiral, we have located the main Ravager command base. It is heavily fortified and protected by their entire remaining fleet. Intelligence estimates over 2,000 ships and planetary defense systems that could repel most invasion forces." Stone nodded calmly. "Understood, Commander. Begin preparation for Operation Final Hunt. All fleet commanders are to report to the flagship for briefing in 2 hours." As the communication ended, Lyra realized what she was hearing. The humans were preparing to attack the heart of the Ravager Syndicate. The final battle that would decide the fate of countless worlds. "Admiral, 2,000 ships. Even with your capabilities, those odds seem impossible." Stone's smile was predatory, but somehow reassuring. "Doctor, humans have a saying. The difficult we do immediately. The impossible just takes a little longer." Over the following days, the human fleet departed in waves, leaving only a small garrison to help with reconstruction efforts. Lyra watched them go with mixed emotions. Part of her was relieved to see the dangerous predators leave their peaceful world. But another part of her understood that the galaxy was losing its protectors. The battle at the Ravager homeworld lasted 3 days and was visible to observers several star systems away. Energy discharges lit up space like miniature stars as the largest fleet engagement in galactic history raged across multiple planets and asteroid fields. When it was over, the Ravager Syndicate ceased to exist. Their leadership was dead, their fleets were destroyed, and their remaining forces scattered to the far reaches of space. The reign of terror that had lasted for generations ended in 72 hours of systematic annihilation. Admiral Stone returned to Altea one final time before departing for Earth. He met with the newly elected Planetary Council in what had once been the Ravager Command Center, now converted into a memorial for the victims of the occupation. "The immediate threat is over," he announced to the gathered leaders. "However, the galaxy is a dangerous place. Other predatory species may try to fill the power vacuum left by the Ravagers. We will be monitoring the situation." Council Leader Hadrick, formerly the captain of the research vessel that had first contacted Earth, stood to address the human admiral. "Admiral Stone, on behalf of all peaceful species in this sector, we thank you. But we must ask, how can we contact your people if such threats arise again?" Stone handed him a communication device unlike anything in Altine technology. "This will reach our monitoring stations in the Outer Rim. But understand something important. Earth does not guarantee protection to anyone. We respond to threats against peaceful species, but we expect those species to be willing to defend themselves. When possible," he looked around the room at the assembled delegates from dozens of worlds. "The age of easy conquest is over. Word of what happened to the Ravagers will spread throughout the galaxy, but predators are persistent. They will test your resolve. Be ready." As the human fleet prepared for departure, they left behind more than just military victory. They had left a fundamental change in how the galaxy understood power and protection. Species that had never considered military development began to establish defense forces. Trade routes that had been abandoned due to piracy began to operate again. Dr. Lyra stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt space station, watching the human ships disappear into hyperspace. In her hand, she held a data pad containing detailed information about human history, culture, and technology. The humans had shared knowledge freely, holding back only their most dangerous military secrets. As she read about Earth and its people, she began to understand the true nature of what had happened. The humans had not just saved the Alteans. They had reminded the galaxy that civilization required guardians, and sometimes those guardians had to be willing to do terrible things to protect beautiful ones. The final entry in the human cultural database was a simple message from Admiral Stone himself. The universe is not a safe place. It never will be. But as long as Earth endures, the strong will not be allowed to prey upon the weak without consequence. We are watching. We are waiting. And we remember both our friends and our enemies equally well. In the depths of space, human monitoring stations continued their silent vigil, scanning for signs of new threats to peaceful civilizations. The Deathworlders had returned home, but their message echoed across the galaxy. Some hunts never end, and some predators never stop watching. The galaxy had learned that when you pray for mercy, sometimes the universe sends something far more effective. It sends justice, carried by creatures who understand that peace is not a gift, but a choice that must be enforced by those strong enough and brave enough to make the hard decisions. Earth had answered the call once. The knowledge that they might answer again changed everything.